Here's Israel in 1948. It's a tiny country, isolated, surrounded by a hostile Arab world. In our first 70 years, we made peace with Egypt and Jordan, and then in 2020, we made the Abraham Accords, peace with another 4 Arab states. Now look at what happens when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. We tear down the walls of enmity. We bring the possibility of prosperity and peace to this entire region, but we do something else. You know, a few years ago, I stood here with a red marker to show the curse, a great curse, the curse of a nuclear Iran. But today I bring this marker to show a great blessing, the blessing of a new Middle East between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and our other neighbors. We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change.
Latest updates on what is going on in Israel and also what this means for the long term for the country itself in regards to the Middle East. We'll be talking about that in a minute. Let's get right to the updates. Israel said this 2-week-old Gaza evacuation call is now urgent. The Israeli military said that its calls on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip to evacuate southward was now urgent, which means that the incursion is about to begin. I mean, really begin. Over the last 2 weeks, we have been calling on residents of the northern Gaza Strip and Gaza City to relocate southward temporarily. Well, let's talk about that. It's not temporarily. This is permanent. There's nobody going to be living in Gaza City ever again. Relocating southward is for their personal safety, said Chief Spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. We are today emphasizing that this is an urgent call, he added in a televised briefing. U.S. President Joe Biden underscored the need for Israel to defend its citizens in a manner that also protects civilians during a call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the White House said. A little bit too late there. Biden also underscored the need to immediately and significantly increase the flow of humanitarian assistance to meet the needs of civilians in Gaza. This should have been right away. Now, the reason why he's saying these things is obvious, because millions are protesting, and this is going to hurt the Biden administration for re-election next year. I think he's finished anyway, but this is the nail on the coffin. But the United States, again, you know, for those who say, oh, Israel controls the United States, it's not that one-way street. This is a two-way street here. Without the United States, Israel doesn't exist. So there is a two-way street here in regards to who controls who. The United States provides the military and the strength. Israel provides strategic analysis, technology, advancements or whatever, and also espionage. Let's not talk about that, because this is basically going to take away from the updates, which I'm here to talk about. Today, the intensity, frequency, and velocity of the attacks has been unprecedented if we compare it to the past few days. Rockets were launched toward Israeli settlements, where we saw several impacts in the city of Kiryat Shemot. Also, it was very significant that rockets were launched into Rosh Pina, which is around 14 kilometers, or 8.7 miles from the border. Israel has been hitting targets that were almost 14 to 15 kilometers, 8 to 9 miles inside Lebanon. We are seeing the depth of the front getting bigger and bigger, and this is a warning that the situation is escalating and is starting to get out of control, which is exactly what Israel wants, because they want the Hezbollah militias to interfere. This brings the United States. Tens of Israeli human rights organizations have urged the international community to act urgently to end the settler violence against Palestinian communities in the occupied West Bank. By the way, now Cabinet Minister Ben-Gvir has basically been handing out weapons to the settlers in the hopes of escalating violence against the Palestinians. According to Haaretz news website, at least 30 NGOs have raised the alarm on the displacement of Palestinian communities due to Israel's settler violence, adding that Palestinian farmers were particularly vulnerable. The NGOs were warned that the Israeli government is in many cases actively participating in anti-Palestinian violence, said the report. Now, at the same time, we're going to start seeing a rise in anti-Semitism against Jews. And we're seeing some reports now about this. And I was afraid this was going to happen, because once this happens, this basically ruins the anti-war movement. And we need to denounce this right away. Israeli envoy says international funding to UN should end. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, has called on the international community to cease funding the global body. Days after the UN General Assembly passed a non-binding resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, because heaven forbid we want peace and less civilian casualties, right? Quote, every honest country should defund the UN until the bias stops and the anti-Semitism stops. We can no longer continue business as usual, end quote, he told Fox News, adding that the UN was structurally flawed because 1/3 of its member states were Muslim countries. That's because there's more Muslim countries than there are Jewish countries. Well, to use that same argument, maybe we should defund AIPAC, because they are disproportionately influential in both the Democrat and Republican parties, and they persuade our Congress with heavy influence. So why don't we just defund AIPAC? Hell, defund Israel, for that matter. I mean, if you were going to go this route. Pending aid to Gaza may constitute crime under the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction, something I've said many times before. Impeding relief supplies to Gaza's population may constitute a crime under the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction, the court's top prosecutor said during a visit to the Rafah border crossing. Rafah border is between Egypt and Israel. Karim Khan, south of the country. Karim Khan also told a news conference in the Egyptian capital of Cairo that Israel must make discernible efforts to make sure civilizations get basic food and medicine. You know, that's what Israel should be counting on regarding their own civilians. And remember, Palestinians are civilians of Israel, but the Israeli government doesn't consider Palestinians civilians or part of their own country. Western coverage of Israel's war on Gaza, bias or unprofessionalism. How about both? Publishing unsubstantiated claims telling only one side of the story and painting Palestinians as nothing more than objects in Hamas's hands are all unprofessional mistakes Western media makes while covering the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Media experts and Arab journalists say that's obvious. You look at the conservative media in this country, it is Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Palestinians, they voted in Hamas, and this all started October 7th. Hamas killed 1,600 people. They're evil. We need to destroy them. Sorry to say about the civilians. Sorry, not sorry, right? This is all basically whitewash screen. Now, I'm not doing this because I'm anti-Israeli, anti-Jew. You better get over that if you're going to label me that. I'm very critical of Arab governments. Take a look at my playlist, my videos. I'm more critical than I am with Israel. That's because Israel's a taboo subject, and you don't like when Israel's being criticized. But everybody gets criticized by me. So what does this mean in the long run? Because, we need to start looking at the bigger picture. Now, you saw the beginning of video of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Middle East map that he prepared for the United Nations, showing that there's going to be a new Middle East. Now, this is nothing new. There's something that's been in the works since 1982, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But he got criticized for this. Germany, U.S. slammed Netanyahu's Middle East map presented at UN. Now, remember, this is September 26th, less than 2 weeks before the October 7th attack by Hamas, which makes you think. There's speculation did Israeli intelligence fail the country because certain people within the Israeli government needed this to happen at the cost of Jewish lives, but for the greater good, which is a map of the new Middle East. In other words, getting rid of the Palestinians out of Gaza City, taking control of Gaza. In other words, not military controlling Gaza, but nobody living there ever, and Israeli settlements in the future once this war dies down. But the greater picture is war with Syria, with Lebanon, and Iran. Now, without them, what happens? Well, the Gulf and Israel benefit. That's exactly what that map was talking about, because they were talking about the future relation between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Was it Israel and Lebanon? No. Was it Israel and Iran? No. Was it even Syria? No. These are the countries that, like I've told you before, these are the countries that have been at war with the U.S. and coalition, as well as Israel and Saudi Arabia, for different reasons. Maybe this is the reason why when Israel visited Saudi Arabia and wanted to repair relationships for the future, they were talking about the new Middle East, which is basically getting rid of the preconceived enemies of the Shia, the Alawites, and other minority from the Middle East. The destruction of the Iranian government by the United States, the destruction of Lebanon and Hezbollah, while also destroying Hamas. By the way, if they wanted to really destroy Hamas, they would go to Qatar, which is where the leadership lives. Most of the funding for Hamas came from Qatar. And like I said in previous videos, using primary source material, news articles, showing you that Israel knew about the funding from Qatar to Hamas, but allowed it to happen anyway in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. Why? Because they wanted Hamas to control the enclave in Gaza, which is the reason why they allowed the Qassam brigades, the military arm of Hamas, to basically commit a coup against Fatah, the opposing party in Gaza, in which they liquidated their leadership, and the rest of them went to the West Bank. And Hamas took Gaza by force. Wasn't that the people voted for the coup itself? They didn't. They wanted a ruling party to represent them, and Hamas doesn't represent them. They represent themselves. As you could see, that the leadership, or millionaires, are living in Qatar and not in Gaza. Why? Because the Israeli government allows for them to control Gaza through the Qassam brigades from Qatar. There's your link. German Foreign Ministry spokesman Sebastian Fischer on Monday expressed the country's reservations over a map exhibited by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his address to the UN General Assembly. Netanyahu came under scrutiny for presenting what he called the new Middle East, that notably omitted the Palestinian territories. The reason why is because he most likely knew that Gaza was not going to exist anymore. I'm speculating. Have to be careful here. But man, what a coincidence that just 8 days later, Hamas attacks Israel. Israel incurs into Gaza City and flattens and destroys all the towns of Ramal, Khan Yunis, and other areas of Gaza, Gaza City being the most densely populated, home to 2 million Palestinians. Now there's about maybe 1 million, with another 1 million displaced to the south. The German government voiced its criticism, emphasizing the importance of recognizing the occupied and annexed territories in discussions regarding the Israeli-Palestine conflict, bringing attention to the conflict once again. Showing a map that does not depict territories that are occupied or annexed, so to speak, is something that we naturally reject. That is of no help with regard to the efforts to reach a negotiated two-state solution, Fischer said, adding that the German delegation to the United Nations had even submitted a report on the matter. Now, maybe he's telling you. Look, it says the new Middle East. What is he outlining? Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sudan. This is the richest area of the Middle East right here in terms of oil and liquidity. The richest area in all the Middle East is Israel, Lebanon, Syria. Okay. Here's the and Iran. Notice the green. It's like I said, this is a greater geopolitical war. And look, he's showing you the future right here, right now. This is 8 days before Hamas attacks Israel. 8 days before. You're telling me this is a coincidence? Then I'm a coincidence theorist. It's not irrational to think this way because look what's happening right now, right? This is September 25th. It's stunning because these are all the countries that Israel has a relationship with. And they're basically saying, look, to Egypt, we'll have displaced Palestinians live by you. However, you have a large enclave of houses that you just built. Coincidentally enough, there's already class warfare in Egypt, the poor and the rich. Okay? Jordan will basically step out, take some refugees from the West Bank if they need to get rid of the West Bank. Saudi Arabia to support Israel in their war against Lebanon, Syria, and Iran by providing oil to the military, providing intelligence regarding those countries. This is really big. When questioned about the map's omission of Palestinian territories, Miller responded, I'm not going to get into any discussion about the map that the Prime Minister chose to use. I will say that the President has been clear that the United States will continue to support a two-state solution. There is not going to be any two-state solution because if that was the case, it would have happened many decades ago. The two-state solutions that Israel offered to the PLO was not fair. Israel controls the water, they control the airspace, they still have military checkpoints. Hey, we'll give back some settlement communities to you. Settlers got angry, and now there's more settlements being built than ever before. Because that's what Netanyahu needed in regards to his sixth term as prime minister. He needed the backing of the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, because of what was about to come, and that is war with the Palestinians, war with Iran and the Hezbollah militia. In response to further inquiries, Miller underscored the U.S. position, stating that the president made it clear in his meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu last week that we continue to support a two-state solution. There's the Stimson Center, which promotes international security and shared prosperity through applied research and independent analysis, right? And two analysts there, Robert Manning and Matthew Burrows, wrote on October 11, 2023, about the global consequences of the new Middle East. And we're going to take a look at this. The new Middle East, the new Middle East and its global consequences. Rarely have trends reversed themselves with such lightning speed until last Saturday. The received U.S. wisdom on the Middle East saw a pattern of detente and reconciliation. Sunni Arab states normalizing with Israel, the map. Saudi detente with Iran. U.S. informal arrangements restraining Iran nuclear activities, unloading years of turmoil and conflict. Today, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Gaza war looks instead more likely to spread to the West Bank and southern Lebanon than end soon. engulfing a major U.S. ally with consequences for America and the world, which that's absolutely correct. The consequences will fall on us because we're going to be the ones fighting against Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran because Israel is not equipped to fight. They're not a fighting country. No matter how many times you hear on Newsmax or OAN or Fox News or CNN that Israel is a major military power. No, they're not. They couldn't even beat Hezbollah in 2006. Sorry. You think they're going to fight against the Persians in Iran? They'll get crushed. And it'll be, that would be a week. If the U.S. gets more directly involved in the fighting, it could reverse what has been seen as the desire by the Trump and Biden administrations to retrench from the region in favor of greater focus on China with the Ukraine war, Russia. And that's what Israel was afraid of. See, nobody remembers Ukraine now. Nobody cares about Russia now. This is all over the news. Israel, Hamas, Palestinians, Lebanon. Soon, you won't hear about the Palestinians anymore because it'll be Hezbollah. Soon, you won't hear about Hamas anymore. Soon, it'll be Iran. The Palestinians, as always, will be a forgotten memory, like they always are, until a next tragedy happens upon them. And of course, the Arab world, they don't care. Gulf doesn't give a shit. United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they don't care. They'll say, oh, Israel should do something about the casualties. Palestinians have rights, but they won't ever intervene. This is the reason why Israel controls these countries. Not control, but politically have influence, like they do here in the United States. Israel doesn't control anything. Okay, they have a major influence. Major. And why? Ask yourself why that is. In the United States, I think it's obvious. Because Israel has a large contingent of Zionists that are not Jews inside the United States. They're called evangelical Christians. They're the biggest voting bloc in the United States. They're the red states. These aren't Christians, so to speak. These are evangelical Christians where they believe that, the last war in the world is at the Battle of Megiddo, where Christ returns, picks up the 144,000 chosen, comes back, and those who don't, convert are killed in many years of pestilence and death, including all the Jews, because they don't believe in Christ. Well, what does the Jews believe? The religion of Jews. Well, they believe that once the third temple is rebuilt, the Mashiach returns, and basically the Jews are in heaven, and they have 500 Gentiles as slaves. Meanwhile, according to whatever interpretation you read from regarding the Talmud, Jesus is boiling in a pot of excrement, the only person in hell, because Jews don't believe in hell. That's a new invention. Only Islam and Christianity have the concept of eternal hell for the non-believer. No other religion has this. It's funny how people twist religion to their own agendas, politically and apolitically. Huh? Hamas' unprecedented and well-planned attack on Israel, the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, has created a new zeitgeist, with the successes of the U.S.'s Abraham Accord strategy upended and their future put in doubt. Israel ties with 6 Arab countries and efforts to normalize Israel-Saudi ties were on hold and in charted waters. Widespread pro-Palestinian response in the region and across the Islamic world, including Indonesia, the largest Islamic state, highlights Israel's dilemma. Responses to the attack, or lack thereof, will also impact what has been a stable Israeli-Russia relationship, with Israel taking a low profile in Ukraine, but getting little help from Russia in response to the attack. Now, does this sound familiar about what the Israeli foreign policy of the 1980s sounds like? And during that time, Israel AIPAC committee was just getting started. and the influence with AIPAC wasn't as big as it was today. And when you have a small country like Israel, and I'm sorry, AIPAC was created in 1990. So this is what I'm talking about is 8 years prior. So I'm wrong there. The 1980s saw a major impact by Israeli Zionist Jews in American Congress, in American politics, but they didn't know how to basically coexist. Now, the Bush administration was not really a great friend to Israel. The Reagan administration was indeed more aligned with Israel than they were with Saudi Arabia. And it seemed that every other president basically shifted. They catered to Saudi Arabia, whereas, for example, Reagan catered to both Israel and Saudi Arabia, but more so with Israel. The Bush administration senior catered to Saudi Arabia more than Israel. Clinton catered more to both. And then, of course, Bush Jr. and his neocon cabinet basically, at first, not really a friend to Israel, but 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden, one-way street. 9/11 was the pretext. Neocon, dual Israeli citizenship, Dov Zakheim, Richard Perle, Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith. What did we do? We went to war with Iraq. We went to war with Afghanistan. And then later on, under the Obama administration, which basically wasn't pro-Zionist, but they did cater to the Zionist agenda of eliminating Arab states like Syria and Libya. At no point did we go to war with the Gulf. Oh, by the way, I thought 16 and 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia. I thought there was Saudi spies in San Diego assisting 2 known al-Qaeda operatives in Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. So Israeli politics back then saw the threat of the Arab states in the 1980s. The oil boom of Saudi Arabia, the growing Ba'athist regime under Saddam Hussein in Iraq, which they feared, Iran under the Mullah Khomeini and the Quds military force, and the looming presence of the Persians, which have a direct influence and a connection to Hezbollah in Lebanon through Syria. So in 1982, there was a Zionist think tank paper called, and I did a video on this before, A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s, also known as the Yinon Plan. The article refers to, which, by the way, was written by Oded Yinon, a former advisor to Ariel Sharon, who served as the prime minister of Israel between 2001 to 2006. The paper cites that there needed to be political projects in the Middle East in terms of a logic of sectarian divisions, in which it would play a role in both conflicts resolution analysis and also by adopting policies under the George W. Bush administration, which later became the Bush Doctrine. Before that was the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which saw that the neocons wanted to majorly influence against Iraq, the same country we tried to blame for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and later blamed for their connection to al-Qaeda and 9/11, which was both false. Iraq had nothing to do with either one. The Yinon paper argued that the world was witnessing a new epoch in history that required a fresh perspective and an operational strategy to implement it regarding what the West was disintegrating under the Soviet Union and the Third World, and of course, the anti-Semitism in the Arab world, preconceived. But there is anti-Semitism. So Israel needed to basically have options. And the blueprint for the Middle East involved who? Egypt, Jordan, the West Bank, Lebanon, Iraq. Now, as you saw in the new Middle East map, Egypt is involved because they're a rich country. And also, they are south of the country where they can take in Palestinians. Jordan and the West Bank, well, obviously, if Gaza is gone, West Bank will be gone. That'll be next. We're already bombing West Bank. The settlers are already attacking Palestinians there without much of any interference from any foreign source. And if need be, the Palestinians need to go where? To Jordan. And then, of course, Lebanon and Iraq. Lebanon is Hezbollah. They've always been a conflict for years. And even former Secretary of State under the Nixon administration, Henry Kissinger, whose own Middle East diplomacy was thought to be greatly detrimental to Lebanese interests. And he was also rumored to be planning the partition of Lebanon in 2 states. Iraq, I mean, this is obvious. First Gulf War, 2003 U.S. invasion, based on lies. We got rid of Saddam Hussein, got rid of the Ba'athist regime. There's an enemy to Israel gone. I'm going to read a part of the paper for you, which I thought was of interest. Right? The peace policy and the return of territories to it dependence upon the United States precludes the realization of the new option created for us. Since 1967, all the governments of Israel have tied our national aims down to narrow political needs, on the one hand, and on the other, to destructive opinions at home, which neutralized our capacities both at home and abroad. Failing to take steps toward the Arab populations in the new territories acquired in the course of a war forced upon us is the major strategic error committed by Israel on the morning after the Six-Day War. We could have saved ourselves all the bitter and dangerous conflicts since then if we had given Jordan to the Palestinians. Huge here. Remember what I said about the West Bank, who live west of the Jordan River. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if we eliminate the West Bank, where do the Palestinians go? Well, if Israel has Jordan and Egypt part of the new Middle East, what does that mean? The Palestinians will be living there. And Israel will basically say, you're part of us. In other words, nothing is going to happen to you. Because all we need to do is, if we can get, there's this famous quote, and I forgot who was this Israeli politician that basically said to a journalist, an American journalist, says, and they were at a bar, and he puts down a napkin. He goes, I can have 80 senators on this napkin vote yes for anything that Israel wants. That's the power of the Israeli influence in the United States. Forgot who said it, but if Israel has Jordan and Egypt and as the new Middle East, or part of the new Middle East, that part of that deal is that they have to take in the Palestinians. And this is 1982, by the way, this paper. And Oded Yinon, Israel Shalak, who translated it, Yinon basically stated that the mistake was that the Palestinians to go to Jordan, because now they created this military checkpoint called the West Bank and then Gaza. And basically, Israel now has to play, prison guard, because these are open air prisons. That's what they were. By doing that, we could have neutralized the Palestinian problem, which we nowadays face, and to which we have found solutions that are really no solutions at all, such as territorial compromise. God forbid we get back the land that we took from them, or autonomy, which amount, in fact, to the same thing. Because they didn't want autonomy. Zionists don't want autonomy with Palestinians. They want them out. And if you look at the foreign policy of Zionist Israel, Palestinians are not part of the future. I mean, look at, like I said, again, not to sound like a broken record, look at Netanyahu's current cabinet. They tell you there's no place for the Palestinians anymore. They say it out loud because no one's going to do anything about it. Today, we face immense opportunities for transforming the situation thoroughly, and this we must do in the coming decade. Otherwise, we shall not survive as a state. In the course of the 1980s, the state of Israel will have to go through far-reaching changes in its political and economic regime domestically, along with radical changes in its foreign policy, in order to stand up to the global and regional challenges of this new epoch. Now, what they're talking about regional changes in its foreign policy, meaning radical, more nuanced, more fervent actions taken against the Palestinians. And also to be more aggressive and getting the United States as a partner for life. What happens from this paper 8 years later? The American Israeli Public Affairs Committee is created, AIPAC, which forever solidifies the future as Israel becomes more influential in American politics, and having smaller organizations monitor major corporations and U.S. universities in regards to how the American populace sees Israel, by doing polls, opinion polls, by having opinionated quizzes. It's all carefully constructed because they must persuade the government and then, by essence, persuade the people. And those who are adamantly opposed to the Israeli project are deemed anti-Semitic. It doesn't work anymore because they used it all the time. And now it's lost its luster. And those are the real victims of anti-Semitism, of the Jews who basically come under attack by whoever blamed for the Israeli government's actions. The loss of the Suez Canal oil fields, of the immense potential of the oil, gas, and other natural resources in the Sinai Peninsula, which is geomorphically identical to the rich oil-producing countries in the region. By the way, the rich oil-producing countries in the region, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, will result in an energy drain in the near future and will destroy our domestic economy. 1/4 of our present GNP, as well as 1/3 of the budget, is used for the purchase of oil. The search for raw materials in the Negev and on the coast will not, in the near future, serve to alter that state of affairs. And this is the reason why Israel has basically reached out to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf partners and have now extended their relationship, not from the United States, but also to the Gulf, because they need their oil and because they need them on their side in regards to the greater war, which is Iran, Lebanon, Syria. And this, my friends, is what Netanyahu is referring to as the new Middle East. A Middle East controlled by two countries, Israel, Saudi Arabia. It's also, incidentally enough, the two countries the United States government is protecting in regards to pre-intelligence of the 9/11 attacks. Because what two countries' intelligence services were inside the United States monitoring al-Qaeda before 9/11? Saudi Arabia and Israel. Is everything starting to make sense now? I know it's a lot I laid on your plate. With some speculation, but not too irrational, where things look like what they are right now in regards to the greater picture. Okay, that's all for this video. And any other updates, which I'm sure there's going to be, I will make sure that you are, I will report them to you without bias, without prejudice. And because an informed public is an informed movement. Have a good day, everybody. Have a good weekend.